Explosions rocked the asphalt as 18 huge wheels rumbled alongside it. SCP Foundation armored vehicles rolled down the highway after a certain Freightliner FL-86 cab over a semi-truck, which was more than meets the eye. The front of the procession opened fire with the artillery turrets mounted on the back of the cars. Bullets impacted the truck trailer, but did not pierce through because the durability of the target was far too high. In an instant, the Freightliner transformed from a brightly colored terrestrial vehicle into none other than Optimus Prime, who returned fire. The projectiles from his barrage cannon fully decimated several of the vehicles that were attacking him, but more rolled in to replace them. He activated his jet wings and soared above the skyline of the city, blasting more of the pesky humans with his ion blaster. Below, cars exploded as drivers tucked and rolled to safety. On the rooftops, a slew of mobile task force agents dropped their cloaking devices and mounted bigger guns against the surface. With many thunderous reports, the guns bombarded against the metallic body of Optimus Prime. The caliber was high enough to scratch the Autobots' armor, and Optimus wouldn't take that lying down. He brought forth his almighty Energon axe and slashed one of the giant artillery guns into two halves, which exploded. Just then, MTF operatives zoomed into view with jet wings of their own and adapted Energon weaponry. Optimus Prime cringed in pain as the stolen Autobot technology inflicted a decent chunk of damage onto his mechanical form. He tried to retaliate with his Energon axe, but the human-sized targets were moving too swiftly to be struck. Switching tactics, Optimus abandoned his axe and deployed an Energon minigun. The rate of fire was so rapid that it not only caught up to the jetpack users, but also destroyed all of the Foundation artillery that remained on the rooftop. Optimus Prime scanned for new targets, but one found him first. It was SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, who had also grown jet wings in order to reach the heroic Autobot leader and cut into his robotic flesh with its claws. Optimus Prime emptied the clip of his Energon minigun into the imposing scaly frame of 682 and was immediately filled with regret. All the attack had managed to do was give SCP-682 a taste for Energon and the anomalous ability to wield it. Optimus Prime and SCP-682 clashed against each other with weapons of pure Energon before a tense chase broke out across the cityscape between the two of them. In the lead of this race was Optimus Prime, who had converted back into his semi-truck form. Behind the Autobot was SCP-682 in the form of a Tesla Cybertruck, because even the Transformers' signature power was just feeding the ever-evolving combat capabilities of the reptile. The two trucks zoomed into a long tunnel, where SCP-682 demonstrated an Energon harpoon which hooked itself onto Optimus Prime's trailer. Both anomalies swerved and smashed around and through the other cars in the tunnel, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. It was the deadliest drag race in history between a giant robot and an immortal lizard. On the other side of the tunnel, Optimus Prime returned to his humanoid form and ripped the Energon harpoon out of his chest with his bare cybernetic hands. He then launched a pair of Energon hooks from his own arsenal, which stabbed into the partially mechanized flesh of SCP-682 and flipped its newly car-like body upside down. Optimus then stomped directly on the engine pipe-laden underbelly of the reptile until it was nothing more than a smear of oil and primordial sludge. Naturally, SCP-682 started to regenerate back into its formidable combat-ready shape, so Optimus Prime unleashed the full capacity of his Energon weapons and nearly atomized the hard-to-destroy reptile. Even this was not enough to defeat 682, but Optimus Prime used his jet wings so that he'd be far away when the lizard was back to full strength. The rest of his pursuers from the SCP Foundation would be on his trail soon, so he couldn't slow down. Meanwhile, the intrepid pilots of Mobile Task Force Sigma-9, the SCP Foundation's private air force, are flying at top speed after the Decepticon Starscream in his fighter jet mode. A scrambling sky full of missiles threatened to pen in the alien robot with a fiery doom, but Starscream was faster than any Earth ballistics could hope to keep pace with. With a perfectly executed dynamic turn, Starscream pivoted with his jet turbines and redirected the heat-seeking missiles back into the planes that fired them. The surviving MTF parachuters descended towards the ground, ashamed of their critical loss. A few of the Sigma-9 jets managed to avoid being destroyed in the explosions caused by the fallout of Starscream's slick maneuvers. These lucky few let loose a barrage of minigun fire onto the Decepticon. which didn't do much damage, but was enough to anger the alien warrior. Starscream's ego was punctured more than his metal hide, but in a rage, he smashed through the nearest plane and transformed into his full humanoid shape. He karate-chopped another plane, which spun out and collided with a third, causing a massive explosion. Starscream then launched out a trio of his own missiles, each homing in on a jet and blasted their targets to bits. Sigma 9 wasn't done yet, though. As the reserve pilots moved into formation towards the now extremely maddened Starscream. Using his insane, blistering speed, Starscream activated his saw and carved its length through an incoming jet. The second that the blade of the saw hit the middle of the jet, its engines blew and showered Starscream with debris. Starscream dive-bombed out of the cloud of smoke and sawed through more fighter jets. With a loud and sudden kaboom, Starscream panicked as a missile somehow struck his jetwing and caused him to spin and fall to the ground. As he rose to his giant robo feet, he noticed human-sized combatants racing towards him. It was SCP-2419, the Laughing Men, who started jumping onto Starscream and used their enhanced strength to pummel dents into the material of his body. Starscream retaliated with a furious hatred for these tiny Earthlings, but no matter how much he crushed them and how little mercy he showed them, the Laughing Men could not be stopped. While Starscream struggled relentlessly, several Laughing Men worked together and tore the engine out of his other jetwing. Now grounded, the Decepticon lieutenant was in a dire position and could only hope to temporarily stun his immortal foes. There seemed to be no escape for Starscream, but nonetheless, he deployed his biggest guns to give the Laughing Men a real fight. Meanwhile, elsewhere, sand kicks up around the roaring treads of a brutal tank, ripping through the desert as an Apache attack helicopter strafe above, unleashing a barrage of advanced missiles. Boom, boom, boom. It deftly weaves around the explosions, showing dexterity thought to be impossible by a standard M1 Abrams, and that is because this is no ordinary Abrams. Mines explode under the treads, zapping shrapnel into the undercarriage, which has no effect. It keeps moving as the SCP Foundation helicopters chase on. They deployed the heavy machine guns, peppering the metal shell of the tank with bullets. The tank was undeterred. Whoever was driving must have had nerves of steel, or energon. As the helicopters prepared for another volley, the main gun on the tank swiveled towards one of the helicopters and let off an explosive shell. A direct hit. One of the helicopters exploded, killing the men inside instantly. The second helicopter fell back, knowing it would soon meet the same fate as ground vehicles fell in. ATVs fitted with heavy machine guns and grenade launchers flanked the rogue tank from one side, as other tanks controlled by the Foundation were in hot pursuit. Bang, bang, bang. Machine gun bullets and the combustion of missiles and tank fire fills the air, and yet the rogue tank still persists, deflecting or dodging every single hit. Then it suddenly turned and started fighting back. A beam of pure offensive energon laser power fired out, cleaving through several tanks in one and leaving their drivers as burnt-up husks. But the tank does not stop. It forges forward and smashes through the broken tanks in its way as the ATVs scramble to get around it, firing more guns at the rogue tank. Then, with a flash of energon, the tank transformed, folding into the deadly Decepticon tyrant known as Megatron.
All will bow before Megatron!
Bellowed the robot. From under the various metal flaps of his armor, Stinger rockets blasted out, swarming towards the various vehicles dotted at his metal feet. Kaboom! A symphony of explosions rings out across the desert, unleashing deadly radiation that will give people cancer for years to come. Across the desert, a Chinook rampages through the air, making a beeline for Megatron and all his chaos. Inside, Samsara, the ultimate elite mobile task force, loads its advanced energy weapons. As the Chinook gets closer, they leap out of the vehicle and land in the sand below, wasting no time in firing their weapons at Megatron. The Decepticons were shocked by weapons that would actually hurt him, and quickly turned his ionic cannons against Samsara and returned fire, flipping and pirouetting madly to avoid the lasers. Samsara were undeterred, zeroing in to get closer to their far larger foe, blasting relentlessly. But in getting closer, they fell into Megatron's trap. The Decepticon charged forward with a decisive strike, smashing one of the 4 Samsara members under his mighty metal fist. Then, it was a massacre. He kicked a second, throwing them up far into the air as their laser fired impotently up into the air. only 2 left, and Megatron grabbed one in each hand. With no mercy, he smashed them into each other, reducing them to piles of corrupted cyborg flesh. Little did Megatron know, a giant cargo plane was hovering high overhead, preparing for another contingency to be activated. The doors in the bottom of the plane opened, and a huge metal box fell from the heavens, plummeting towards the desert floor. The box opened, and out flew SCP-096, like the evil of Pandora's forces, and as Megatron registered 096's terrible face, it immediately entered its homicidal rage state. 096 charged in for Megatron, yelling and screaming, its long arms bounding across the dirt. Megatron deployed a wrist-mounted machine gun and unleashed hell onto the beast, but it shrugged off every bullet and continued its rampage. The Shy Guy leapt, reaching for Megatron with its grasping claws, but he backhanded the beast, sending it skidding across the desert. Before 096 could move again, Megatron zoomed in and punched the monster with his huge metal fist, punching and kicking again and again, alternating between firing energon beams and firing missiles, setting fire to its spindly body. But 096 wouldn't go down that easy. It started punching back, putting dents into Megatron's metal exoskeleton. He tried to block, but the monster was shockingly fast, clawing deep gashes into the armor, bleeding oil and energon. The Decepticon felt a twinge of mortal terror for the first time as he flung the Shy Guy off of himself, sending it tumbling across the desert. In a split second, he took on the form of a jet and zipped into the sky, leaving a deep red vapor trail. But that didn't mean he was out of the woods yet. With a running start, 096 leapt off the ground and jumped onto the jet, still clawing and tearing, screaming relentlessly. His claws dug into Megatron's engines and ripped them free, sending the jet careening down into the nearby mountains and exploding into a great ball of fire and smoke. Is Megatron still alive in there? But we can't worry about that right now. In the middle of a nearby crowded metropolitan city center, Bumblebee, the plucky yellow Autobot, is going toe-to-toe with SCP-076, Abel, the immortal warrior. The warrior presses a huge obsidian chainsaw up against the yellow chassis of his opponent, sending sparks everywhere as the lovable Autobot gave a sharp exclamation of pain. The warrior did not let up. The pain noises from a fearful foe just excited his bloodlust. He kept striking Bumblebee's armor with his chainsaw, hoping to carve through and strike at something vulnerable inside. Bumblebee transformed his arm into his trademark plasma cannon and fired a blast at Abel, shattering the chainsaw before delivering a punch to Abel's tattooed chest, sending him flying back through the office window behind him in a shower of glass. But there was no respite for Bumblebee. Abel immediately leapt back out of the building, now wielding a huge obsidian club from one of his deadly pocket dimensions. He brought it down onto Bumblebee's head before he even had a chance to react, sending the unfortunate Autobot tumbling back down to the asphalt. Abel struck him again and again, each blow somehow feeling more deadly and decisive. Bumblebee did what Transformers do best and transformed, shifting into the iconic yellow VW Beetle we know and love, and driving directly into Abel, beginning a brutal test of strength. Anomalous man versus alien car. Bumblebee had the advantage as Abel lost his ground, the car driving directly into his chest and knocking him against the wall. With one powerful acceleration, Bumblebee could eliminate the diabolical warrior's life. But there was a problem. A young child was running through the ruined streets, passing directly between Abel and Bumblebee. The pragmatic warrior seized his chance, reaching out and grabbing the child, using them as a human shield. Bumblebee, always having a soft spot for humans, was unable to drive forward and defeat his foe. That's when the rest of the elite Pandora's Box mobile task force struck, using energon-disabling technology to freeze Bumblebee in his car form in place and load him onto the back of a secure truck for easy transport. In the Titan-class SCP Foundation containment sites, far from the prying eyes of populated areas, 4 new anomalies remain contained: Optimus Prime, the heavily damaged Megatron and Starscream, and the unfortunate Bumblebee, who had learned a hard lesson from his mistake that day. When dealing with far more ruthless opponents, there's no room for mercy if you want to succeed. Now go check out what does SCP-056 do while alone in containment, and using the infinite IKEA as a nuclear bunker, SCP-3008.